we look at American history between 1942 and 1947, the data that was collected by the Census Bureau was handed over to the FBI and other organizations at the request of President Roosevelt, and that's how the Japanese were rounded up and put into the internment camps. I'm not saying that that's what the administration is planning to do, but I am saying that private personal information that was given to the Census Bureau in the 1940s was used against Americans to round them up. I think there is a point when you say enough is enough to government intrusion. And you had mentioned this earlier, 28 pages. I have the survey right here, Glenn. This is the 28-page survey. This is the short form that every American will get next year. Does the federal government really need to know our phone numbers? Do they really need to know, like you said, the date and time that we leave, mental stability? You know the one question that's not on this survey, Glenn? Are you a U.S. citizen? I am just not comfortable with the way this census is being handled, with associating with ACORN, with the questions that are being asked, with Americans being compelled to give this information. How will this be cross-checked? Will it be held privately?
It's up to a $5,000 fine.
They're saying that if somebody who is connected with ACORN, now working for the U.S. Census, shows up at your door, knocks on it, and demands to know your race, your employment status, the name of everybody in your household, whether you've ever received food stamps, and your phone number, and everybody else's phone number, and you say, I'm not really comfortable giving that to you, you're going to get fined $5,000.
The United States government between 1942 and 1947 passed the Second War Powers Act. They used the U.S. Census information to round up the Japanese and put them in the internment camps. Okay. Americans were told that they wouldn't have their information used against them. They did.
Well, one of the things that we're fighting here in Oklahoma City, we have a radio show called Radio Free Oklahoma, and we try to get the information out about the upcoming swine flu vaccines. You hear that Northcom is coordinating with FEMA to work for the mandatory vaccinations. There's all the legal framework in place through the Patriot Acts and the Emergency Medical Powers Act to force these vaccines on people. And then if you deny it, you know, where are you going to go? Well, they say that you can be charged with a felony or put into a quarantine area. Now it's starting to come into view how these camps could be used.
Well, today we're in a circumstance where the economic and the political dynamics are pushing America and the whole world into a crisis dynamic. This crisis is being created through the process of sustainable development policy. Several things are occurring. One is that our system of justice is being changed. We're shifting from equal justice, where every human being has certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and property, etc., to a system of social justice where no one has any such right, but where people are judged based upon the group that they're part of.
Previously, there have been several reports, such as the MIAC report in the state of Missouri, but this is the first time that a report such as this actually named individuals. Once you label someone in a derogatory manner, an extremist, a potential militia member, terrorist, whatever term is used, for some people the moniker will remain. Before you can persecute people, before you can incarcerate large numbers of people, you have to marginalize them. You have to create the image that these people are dangerous to society, or they're extremists or radicals, call them what you will, but marginalize them from the mainstream of society so that at that point the rest of society will accept the persecution that might result upon this group. It's been an age-old strategy that's worked in every totalitarian regime in the history of the world, and that's why we're concerned here in the United States when we see this kind of marginalization going on about people who voted for Ron Paul or people who voted for Chuck Baldwin. Why are they being marginalized? Why are they being singled out as a potential danger to society. And I think it's shades of the strategies and tactics of totalitarian regimes in history past, and that should never happen in this country.
The people in Washington, D.C. haven't represented what was on the American people's minds for a long, long time. They are the most disassociated, discombobulated, disconnected people on this planet. And they necessarily had to do that for all the violations of the Constitution that they've done.
Just how far are you willing to go before you stand up and say no more to the federal government? Our founders actually intended for the federal government to be very small and limited, and that most of the service of government was to be done in the states. And so I think there's probably a growing conflict between states and the federal government. And I think there's some really good reason for the federal government to be concerned right now, because I think there are a lot of people in the United States that are beginning to say, where are we going to draw the line in the sand and say no more to the federal government?
Every generation faces tyranny. Every generation faces corruption, and is forced to stand up against it or become enslaved. Our ancestors fought and died so that we'd have the little bit of liberty we have now. It is a sacred treasure. And from liberty comes all prosperity. The human race is depending on all of you out there that are seeing this information to educate yourself on the facts presented in this film and then to take action.
We've got to forget about Washington, D.C. I think Washington, D.C. is too far gone. It's a cesspool of iniquity. I think it's totally and thoroughly corrupt. It doesn't matter which party you put in charge of the White House or Congress, nothing of substance changes. I really think the power and strength of the people rests where it always has rested, and that is with the states.
So we need to start putting some teeth into our state laws, and we need to be electing sheriffs that are going to protect us from federal agents when they initially don't understand this because their civics lessons weren't very good in school.
The 10th Amendment very clearly says any authority not granted to the federal government by the Constitution belongs to we the people and the sovereign states that make up this union.
The states had all the power. They gave some few powers that are listed in the Constitution to the federal government and kept all the rest for themselves.
Well, my first guest works for the people of Oklahoma, and he's trying to do right by them. But he believes it's kind of hard to do that when the federal government keeps butting into the state's business. And now he's working to pass a bill in the state of Oklahoma that would declare state sovereignty from the federal government.
Well, the resolution is saying that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land and that it specifically delegates certain powers to the federal government, and all other powers are reserved to the people and the states, and that the federal government has increasingly moved out of that framework over the last several decades, and that they need to get back into that proper role.
A number of states already have them. Many more are considering similar resolutions as a bulwark, proponents say, against the federal government handing down laws that they see as unfunded or unconstitutional.
Ongoing pattern of overstepping its constitutional authority.
Dozens of states are now considering resolutions asserting their sovereignty under the 10th Amendment in the Constitution, pushing back against Washington's intrusion into everything from land use to gun control.
And there's really somewhat of an uprising in the states across the country is this federal law called the Real ID Act.
Texas appears ready to declare its sovereignty again. A resolution doing just that has the unabashed endorsement of the state's governor.
I believe the federal government has become oppressive. I believe it's become oppressive in its size, its intrusion in the lives of its citizens, and its interference with the affairs of our state.
The bill, HCR 50, is currently in Texas's House. It reasserts the constitutional guarantee of the 10th Amendment.